Okay, so just wanted to give everyone a couple minutes to sign in and give our participants a moment to kind of gather their bearings. But I just wanted to say hello to everyone. If you have not met me, my name is Chrissy Meek, and I am the career consultant for the College of Professional Education and the College of Nursing at the TW Career Connection Center. And we would just like to welcome you all. We're really excited to have you here at our Connect to Careers event today, where we will focus on careers in higher education. We've got some wonderful panelists today to share their experiences with you. So I'm excited to let them introduce themselves and then we will get started. So I'll just pass it off to whomever would like to start. Not all at once.
Okay, I'll start. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Chrissy, for putting this on. We are delighted to be here. I'm Dr. Roxanne Del Rio, and I'm Dean of Students over at North Central Texas College. Do you want me to talk a little bit about what I'm doing, Chrissy, or?
Actually, I think more about your history and experiences will be our first question. So
Okay.
I think we can just do names for now, and then I'll jump into our first question.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Dr. Del Rio.
Hi, I'm Laura Trujillo Jenks. I'm the interim chair for the Department of Teacher Education at Texas Women's University.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Zach Shirley, he, him pronouns. I am the director for the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life. So this amazing building behind me at the University of North Texas.
Hey everyone, my name is Damien Torres, so you see him pronouns, and I currently serve as the director of the Multicultural Center at the University of North Texas.
Hello everyone, my name is Josh Walton, and I'm our Associate Director of New Student Programs in the Center for Student Development at Texas Women's University.
Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. And again, just thank you so much for being here today. So we'll go ahead and jump into our questions. The first one is, can you tell us just a little bit about who you are, specifically your current role in your own words, and a brief summary of maybe your past experiences as well?
Sure, I'll start. Again, Roxanne Del Rio, Dean of Students over at NCTC. And you know, that particular position is very interesting because it's the catch-all position. So I deal a lot with conduct. I'm the Title IX coordinator. I also do student life for Denton County, community outreach. I currently manage the elite team, which is the mini G-Force that you all have, envious of you guys. And I've always been in higher education. I served as a interdisciplinary advisor at UT Arlington. And before that was at the University of Dallas with the Catholic University in Irving, serving as their director of admissions and their director of international enrollment management.
I am again, the interim chair for the Department of Teacher Education, and my program is in educational leadership. And the chair position is a very unique one, and I'm learning about it very quickly. This is my second semester in this position. Before higher education, I was in public education as a teacher in special education, certified in French, and also in general education. I was also an assistant principal and principal, and was at the district level as a special ed coordinator. So all of that has really helped me in the position I am now, since it is considered a leadership position. And again, I come from the educational leadership program, so it just, everything just has come together.
So whenever someone asks me to describe what I do, it's like, I'm a risk manager, I'm a programmer, I'm a adjudicator, I am an advisor. Fraternity and sorority life is extremely nuanced in the fact that literally as cliche as this sounds, no 2 days are the same. I could wake up thinking that I'm going to attend X number of meetings and visit X number of programs, but then a fraternity or sorority hazing case or a sexual assault or a bias incident occurs. I could be talking to parents all day. I could be talking to the police department all day. I could be talking to headquarters all day. I could be talking to those individuals all in the same day. And so with fraternity and sorority life, if you are not a fan of a very fast-paced, ever-changing by the second environment, you probably wouldn't like doing this work. Conversely, though, it is extremely rewarding because of the fact that you get to see right in front of your eyes the development of students every single semester, from when they came in as wide-eyed, bushy-tailed freshmen to now becoming chapter presidents, council presidents, maybe even leadership consultants once they leave. So the transformation that occurs when fraternity and sorority is done right, because there are ways that it is done wrong, is very, very rewarding.
Yeah, and I also just kind of expanding what everyone else has touched on. I think when folks give me this, it's always kind of a twofold, right? Personally, I just like to highlight some of those things because I think it plays an important role. My family immigrated to the States when they were young. And while I had the opportunity to be born in San Antonio, right, I kind of lived this duality experience. And from a young age, this idea of like collectivism versus self-preservation was instilled in me, right? I say that because it's important, that informs and influences, right, who I am as an individual and even in the work that I do on a college campus. And so fast forward professionally, as a director of the Multicultural Center on campus, very similar to Zach, every day is looking different, right? Because we never know when someone is going to tweet, say, experience some discriminatory event on campus, right? As we've grown in our diversity on campus, not only representationally, right, in our gender diversity, right, in our demographics, we've also seen this idea of inclusiveness being brought to the forefront, and students, and in fact, our whole community members asking questions like, hey, it's not enough to say that we're diverse, right? What are we actually doing to change some of these narratives? And so in a nutshell, what I tell folks I do is we're in the business of telling stories, right? I believe there's a lot of narratives that have stereos or stigmas associated with them. When students, faculty, staff step on our campus, what we do in the MC is give them a platform, right? We don't imitate their experience. We try to capture it as authentically and accurately and share that with the rest of our community so that they can provide a counter narrative, right? So that they can tell their own story and hopefully educate our campus community, right? And so for me, I'm passionate about DEI work on a personal level, and I get to carry that out professionally in a number of different ways. Like Zach mentioned, one day I'm at programs, another day it might be a student protest, another day it might be meeting with administration and sharing them objectively data and how we're trying to change, again, the narrative around what folks believe to be true about certain communities that we work with.
Well, hello. Whoops, I just kicked my table there. So my job working with new student programs, well, I guess I'll give how I got here first. So I did my undergrad at the University of North Alabama. And through that became, which I guess that's the next question. So North Alabama, and then did my graduate work at Auburn University and had a graduate assistantship with orientation. Fell in love with it. I joke with people. I applied to be an OL twice, was never picked in college. And then now I'm running a program. So it's kind of an odd journey to get to where I am with stuff, but my graduate assistantship was orientation. Knew that that had a huge impact on me in my life. I'm first generation myself. And so being able to learn about what college was from my orientation leaders and stuff really played a huge impact on me. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I did nationwide job search and actually worked at UNT for 4.5 years doing the coordinator for orientation there. And then did another nationwide job search and ended up in the same city, oddly enough, doing orientation at Texas Woman's University. And so I'm working with all of our new student programs. So orientation for our first year, transfer, and graduate students. And then I do our Pioneer Camp, which many of you probably went through for first year students, and then programming throughout the time. I work with our family programs and family weekend, and so planning those. And so we work with a lot of parents and families with orientation, helping them to be equipped to support their student in their transition to college. Um, Orientation, as you can imagine, in the summers is pretty wild. There is, like Zach and Damien talked about, there's no telling what you're going to deal with in the summer. It is busy, busy, long days, but it's very rewarding. I always tell people my favorite thing about my job is seeing students come into orientation scared and unsure, and then seeing them leave with their families after, knowing like, okay, this is home, we can do this. And so it's very rewarding in that aspect, but it's a lot of work to get there. But I really enjoy it and love working with my student leaders too. They're a great team.
I really appreciate that sentiment, Josh. I think it really highlights, kind of a little bit of what everyone was talking about in terms of like the passion that led them to where they are right now. So thank you for highlighting that. And thank you all for just sharing a little bit about yourselves and what you're doing now. We'll go to the next question. What experience, whether it was academic, professional, or extracurricular, helped you get your foot in the door or helped you in getting started in your respective fields?
I didn't want to be a K through 12 educator, like just being all the way real. So my twin brother and I, who works at TWU in the Career Connection Center, we both were secondary education, English, and history majors respectively. And so it was like the last 6 weeks before we were graduating from undergrad. And we just sat there and we're like, we don't want to do this. Like, we don't want to do it. We just didn't find our passion in K through 12 education for ourselves, but we knew we wanted to help people. We knew we wanted to be educators in some fashion. So we went to our Dean of Students office later on that week and we plopped down on our couch and, as many students do with their advisors or program staff, they have a chair or a couch in their office and you just sit down on it and you think your life is over because you don't know what you're going to do with your life. And she essentially looked at us and said, well, what is it that you like to do? And we talked about all of our experiences in undergrad. We were both those very over-involved students in undergrad. And she said, well, it sounds like you guys might want to go into student affairs. And we looked at each other and we were like, what's that? And she's like, it's what I do. Like, I work in student affairs. And she said, and we were like, you get paid to do this? And she was like, no, I just come here and volunteer my time every day. Of course I get paid to do this. And so for us, that was really the light bulb that went off. And we were really literally in this mindset of, we want to go into student affairs. We want to do everything. But then you realize you can't do everything in student affairs because there's a lot to do in student affairs. But that led us to A&M Commerce for our master's program. And then eventually into our doctoral programs as well. My first adult job out of grad school was at TWU in CSD, overseeing Greek life and the program. So very, very special place in my heart for TWU as the place where I cut my teeth at. And yeah, I mean, that's how really to this day, our journey started.
So I think I'll go next. I am originally from Corpus Christi, Texas. And so I decided that I was going to attend the community college there called Del Mar College. And through my journey there, I found a work study position in the health science department. And those faculty members within that department really cultivated my passion and my desire to help with students. So for me, I started when I was very young in higher education, loved it, stayed there until I graduated. And then found, after I got my bachelor's degree, found my way back to Del Mar College. And for me, that was my passion. That was my goal, is to continue to help students. I, after that, went to the graduate school of management there at the University of Dallas. Didn't like it as much. So I decided I was going to go to University of Texas at Arlington to get more undergraduate experience. got that, and was put back into the graduate school. And I didn't like that at all. The graduate students are fun to work with, but my passion was helping those students believe in themselves, and helping them believe in themselves, where they didn't have anybody to support them and be their cheerleader. Then I was recruited back to go into the community college setting at NCTC. So that journey was very interesting. I wouldn't give it up for the world. I love my job. I love helping students. And so I think for any future goals or future aspirations I have, it'll be with the community college.
I'll go next. So my journey, how I got to this point. So I was, as an undergrad, I was very involved in Greek life. And so I was very involved in my fraternity, but also with our interfraternal council. And so I served on that council, which is a council that kind of oversees all the fraternities. So I served on the council for 3 years. And as I was getting ready to graduate my senior year, I was talking with our Greek life advisor. I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do in my life. What do I do? He's like, Josh, why don't you do what I do? And so he was like, you can do this. And kind of like Zach, I was like, wait, that's a job you can do? Never even thought about that. And so he's like, yeah. And so we looked through graduate programs and different stuff. I decided to do it very late, so there wasn't many options left. So if you plan to do this, hopefully you make that decision before I did. And so I quickly took my GRE and applied to a couple different schools and ended up working in Auburn and working with their orientation program there. And so I think if you're looking to do this, I think it's important to get to know those other staff and faculty around campus. To kind of, I think, get your foot in the door, like the question kind of asked with stuff, because all of us, I mean, we're here talking about what we're doing now, and we love what we do, or we wouldn't be talking to you about this. And so I think it's important that you kind of find some key people that you work with on campus and have those conversations with them on what this is like. You're already a step ahead if you're here attending this today. And so I think it's important to get involved with many different areas and try to find, we were talking earlier, several of us have bounced around from different areas. I've actually just stayed in orientation since grad school. And so that's kind of an odd situation to be in one thing for my full career so far. But I think it's important to get involved as many stuff as you can. And so you can start to meet people and understand kind of the back end of what we do. People sometimes think it's just cookies and balloons and stuff, but there's a lot more to what we do. There's a lot of development and theory and reasons behind what we do. And so getting close with those staff and faculty can be a big help for getting your foot in the door.
Well, I started off as a business major. I switched to fine arts because I really wanted to be a music major and theater. And then I substitute taught after my mother, who was a principal at the time, said, hey, come and substitute teach during Christmas, you'll earn some extra money. And I fell in love with it. And I happened to have I was a substitute teacher for an adult classroom. They were 18 to 21, and it was just fascinating. So I became a special ed teacher. I loved it. I loved being a teacher. And I worked at the elementary and middle school levels. And then I went back to UT and got my master's and started my doctorate. Well, I started my doctorate in Colorado anyway. But I loved being an administrator, principal, loved it, loved being an assistant principal, loved being a special ed coordinator of the regional school deaf for the for the deaf and the blind, and it was just fabulous. All of that prepared me for my job now. I never thought I was going to go into higher ed, and just out of the blue, a friend called and said, hey, are you ready? And I said, I think I am. And it has been fabulous. Everything that I did in public ed, I have taught in the leadership courses that I had taught, and even in curriculum and instruction and in special education. So all the knowledge and experience that I had gained in public ed definitely helped me in higher ed. And of course, all of the leadership positions that I had in public ed has helped me in higher ed, especially being the chair of the faculty of teacher education, all of us which have come from public education. So yeah, I love what I do. I've been at TWU for 11 years and I plan to retire from TWU. So I love it.
Yeah, and I'll just share that I think for me, my experience growing up really in San Antonio, specifically the south side of San Antonio, right? High Hispanic, Latinx community. You know, I was taught early to be proud of my background and my heritage. But also, I think there's a lot of things that we accepted as normal, i.e. out of like a 450 person class, 50 of us went to school or pursued any form of higher education, right? Title I, school experience, right? All of those things. And so for me, I think that, again, influenced me without me recognizing, hey, how do I educate, right? In those times, I didn't know what it was necessarily, but allow myself to be in spaces where I can empower and develop individuals, right? And for me, it was about just educating them on my experience. And fast forward to undergrad, I come up to UNT, and one of my first roles was volunteering for G-Force before we had any money. So that dates me somewhat. But when it was just us volunteering our time, and I said, yeah, I'm passionate about mentoring students that I related to, right? First generation citizen, first generation student, low economic status, right? All those things. It's like, great. So for 2 years, I got to go around the Dallas-Fort Worth area and literally share my story with them, right? Fast forward, I think I got just as engaged as anyone else did, right? Where I was the president of my Greek organization, joined our tour guide group on campus, joined our top 40 student leader groups on campus, and really found that passion for working with and developing other folks. In my master's program, I had the opportunity, just like everyone else here, to pick what route that I wanted to take, right? What community group I really wanted to work with. And more, what I recognized that what I resonated with was my individual experience, right? Everything in every way that I look at life is through the lens of how I was raised and my identities that I have. And so I said, wow, multicultural affairs or diversity, equity, inclusion work allows me to do that and do educate and do leadership, and do first year programming and do large scale programming, right? And so I get the kind of best of both worlds, I think. And then for me, lastly, I think one of the motivating things that really every day, every week I hit is those aha moments where those ideas like Dr. Del Rio just shared of that stereotype threat or that idea around imposter syndrome, right? I continuously, and today as a professional, ask myself those questions like, hey, am I really fit out to be here, right? Do they know who they let in, right? Am I capable of doing these things? And absolutely, right? And so we want to empower students right then and there and say, hey, you're supposed to be here. Not only are you supposed to be here, you're going to thrive. Here's how we can assist you with that, right? And so while my affinity and a lot of my work leads me to serve the 20,000 plus identifying, right, underrepresented minoritized groups on campus, and some of our disability or gender identity or sexuality groups, ultimately it's for all students, right? And so, I think I am fortunate to be able to use some of these platforms, again, to help hopefully change the stories of some of those students that are on campus and hopefully empower them to say, no matter what space you step into, please be yourself, right? Please own all the ways that you exist. And if you go into multicultural affairs, we need more people always, right? And so everyone here, though, does that work in their own regard. We just are, fully responsible for that.
Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and your experiences with how you got your foot in the door. I think you all did a really wonderful job of illustrating one of the core concepts that we really try and teach people here at the Career Connection Center, which is that career paths are not always linear. They can kind of go in all sorts of different directions. And I really think that's illustrated well by hearing sort of how everybody got to where they are now. So I'm happy to hear all of your stories on that topic. But let's go to the next question. So the next one is, how did this idea of who you know play a role in your own career path, whether it was a direct connection, a networking connection, word of mouth, or even a referral?
That's kind of funny that you asked that question. When I first, TWU is a Hispanic serving institution and a military friendly. We have those monikers, and military friendly is a huge, has a huge part of my heart because I was an Army brat and then I was an Army wife. As an Army wife, when you move constantly, it is difficult to find work, but thank God I was a teacher, so I was able to get work, but I didn't know anybody. So it was my husband's rank, to be honest, which helped me get jobs, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. Besides that, specifically in higher education, mentors are everywhere, even in public ed. Mentors are everywhere. So getting your foot in the door or getting that promotion or getting that position that you really want, some of it is who do you know, but I think, at least for me, a lot of it was what do I have that I can show that proves that I belong where I want to be. Just case in point, when I got my first principalship, I was on cloud 9. And I remember when I was working on my doctorate that our professors used to always tell us, you need to learn how to negotiate your contracts, because I never, as a teacher, negotiated my contract. But as an administrator, I learned how to negotiate my contract, which also helped me find people who respected that, if you will. And then also they helped me find positions because I knew how to speak for myself and get what I needed or wanted. And so I don't know, for me, I've had awesome mentors. I've had awesome people in my life that have put me where I need to be. And when I haven't had people, you just work for it. You just build your reputation and you work for it and you go out there and get what you want.
I think I'll go next. I think one of my biggest supporters and cheerleaders was Dr. Richard Cole. He was the dean of the MPA program, Masters of Public Administration. After graduating from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, decided I was going to leave home. Oh, that was a biggie for my family. My mother didn't talk to me for 3 months because she didn't want me to go away. But I went away anyway, and my parents didn't have a college fund for me. So I've always had to work 2 or 3 jobs to put myself through college, buy my materials and books and things of that nature. They did tell me, you can live here. We want you to go to college, but we can't afford sending you. And that was okay, because if I wanted it, I'm going to get it. And I worked. And so after graduating from, like I said, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, I went over to University of Texas at Arlington, and I got a graduate assistantship with Dr. Richard Cole, the dean of the graduate school, where I was pursuing my Master's of Public Administration. I was a hard worker. He recognized that. He was the one that kind of forged my way for me and encouraged me to continue my education. I did not get to finish my education at UT Arlington. Both my parents were sick, so I had to come back. And when I was ready to go back, called Dr. Cole and asked if he would serve as a reference for me as I was trying to get enrolled in the UNT's MPA program, a Master's of Public Administration. He said, I can do that, and I'll do that now. So he called his friend, Dr. Glass, who was the chair of the department. And then 30 minutes later, I got a phone call from Dr. Glass to say, you're in the public administration program. How can we help you? So ever since that time, I really, really respect anyone who asks for a recommendation or need a helping hand to get to the next level, because Dr. Cole was that person for me. In my job in getting into the PhD program at UNT, he really put some really nice words on a piece of paper, and they admitted me to UNT. I don't think I would have been admitted. He was a very big publisher of federalism and very important to Washington, D.C. So had I not known him, I don't think I would be where I am now. And I thank God for him. He's gone on. He passed away about 4 years ago from colon cancer. And so I miss him every day. So, you know, my advice to you, if you're in a position to help, I strongly recommend that you do, because you never know where that's going to lead that person.
I'll jump in and go next. That word of mouth and who you know, I mean, it is a very real thing in higher education. The world is very small. Like, for instance, we have a new coordinator on our campus that I spoke with earlier today in our Student Money Management Center, that I had several crossovers with her in a couple of different, at 2 different schools with stuff. And so it's very odd, it's very small. I think it is, as undergrad students, it's important if you have a chance to attend maybe like a regional conference. Those can be extremely beneficial, and I know there's ways that TWU can help support you to do those. It's a little different now because a lot of them are virtual, but getting that experience to go to a conference and meet other students at other institutions and other professionals at institutions are huge. Like with my story, my supervisor in grad school, she was actually on the board for NOTA, which is the Association of Orientation, Transition, and Retention. And so, being her grad, she was able to connect me with a lot of people at conferences that helped me get my job later on for my first job coming out of grad school. And so, in talking about how small it is, I mean, I'm on a group me with about 20 other orientation professionals from literally all over the country, and we're friends and we talk all the time, and it's a very small world. And so when like somebody has a grad graduating, they'll throw, hey, this person's amazing, if y'all have any jobs, send them our way. And so there is things like that it's important to get to know people. If you do good work, people will tell you that you do good work. I mean, I've made referrals for students for grad schools. I've written a lot of recommendation letters and helped them get graduate assistantships. So it is important that you're making these connections with the staff and faculty, because they know what you need to know, and they can help connect you with those people. For instance, another one of my students, she was interested in going into grad school for not anywhere that I knew anyone, but her assistantship was going to be in off-campus student services. And so I knew people at a couple of different schools. I was able to connect her to them to get an understanding of what that role could be. And so I think that networking and just being willing to listen, being willing to learn, and taking guidance from people that are in the positions you want to be in one day, I think it can be really critical to your success and development.
So I oftentimes tell my students the difference between networking and not working is 1 letter. And networking and who you know is extremely crucial to the work that we do, because to Josh's point, you know, there's this concept of 6 degrees of separation, and higher ed tried 3 degrees of separation. Like, it's that close knit, you know. And I'll give a very personal example because I believe in transparency. So I cannot tell you how long I have known Davian. I can't even remember when we met. It's like we popped up one day and we've known each other for like 10 years. And that happens. And so when I was applying to the current role I have now at UNT, not only was Davian still at UNT, Not only was Damien a member of the community that I was going to oversee, not only was Damien now an advisor of the community that I was going to oversee, Damien was on the committee. And to know that we've built this relationship and had this rapport with one another, Damien could speak for my ability to do this job and come into this community. And there were other people at UNT as well who knew the caliber of my work, knew the caliber of my skill set. However, had I not taken the time to nurture those relationships years prior, that may not have played into my advantage in this day and age. You know, I remember me coming to my interview, it was less like an interview and more like a family reunion, because I knew so many people there, and I had so many of my former students from other institutions who now worked at UNT, and they could speak to my skill set and my ability as well. So networking is very important, and don't let your networking be just transactional, because you're going to get, the day that you try to take that debit card out and make that transaction, your account is going to be on empty. So make sure that you continue to pour into those relationships. And even after getting the job, you know, still pour into those relationships, still nurture those connections. David picked up the phone. He need anything from me, I'm riding. Let's go. I don't know what it is, but if Damien's calling, I'm going. So, you know, and also to Laura's point, and I'll wrap up, having a mentor is very important. You also need to be able to have a sponsor and a coach. A coach is going to be that individual who, if you have a skill set that you want to develop, find that individual who can coach you up on that, whether it's public speaking or budgeting or Excel. That may be a transactional relationship because they're teaching you to hone a skill set that you need very specifically to do a job, and that's okay. The sponsor piece is also very important. Your sponsors are the ones who speak your name in rooms where you have not even walked into yet. And sometimes you can have a mentor who is also a sponsor and a coach, and sometimes they're three different people. But it all goes back to networking and realizing and being honest with what it is that you need at that time.
Right. And I just want to say, I retweet all the things that these folks have said. They all have great wisdom and insight. And it was in my grad program that I met Dr. Shirley over here in like 2012. And so we go back. I went to Commerce's campus. I sat in his office as a grad student when he was already done. Fast forward, yes, I was one of the search committee members that was making a decision on who would be taking over. And believe, yes, that I was able to speak on intimately, right, the things, the work that I had seen, the connections that he had made. And by no means will I ever take credit, right, for obviously him being here. But ideally, if I was the only person that knew of him, right, I could provide some insight. And so it is powerful to do that. The last things that I'll add, though, are this idea of reciprocity, right, that people have talked about. It's not always a give, right? But as a mentor or as someone who, you know, got no one, I ask students all the time, hey, are you here? Did you get here on your own? Absolutely not. There are countless amounts of individuals that have helped you, right? Now, how you give back to them may not be where you're coaching up Dr. Del Rio on what to do next in her life, right? But you're speaking into her, you're affirming her, right? You're telling her you're thankful for that, right? And so I think that reciprocity is key. And then I think what Zach mentioned around, right, that sponsor, and we, like in DEI words, that's ally versus an accomplice, right? We want allies all day, but that accomplice makes that actionable step, right? Someone that's going to be in spaces, not speak necessarily on your behalf, right? But ultimately be able to dismantle or provide access points when perhaps there would not have been any for you, right? So for me, my journey, when I tell students, and I just met with 2 last week, well, hey, I want to get into diversity and inclusion. How'd you do it? I was like, you're probably not going to look like mine, right? Because I was very fortunate to go as a student leader to a graduate assistantship, to get hired as the assistant director, and now serve as the director, to potentially opening a brand new building like the one that you see Dr. Shirley sitting in front of right now, right here in the next couple of years. And that is, and I, again, I'm always reminded about how fortunate I am to be in that. but ultimately your reputation precedes you, right? And so we want to make sure that any space that you're in, the energy and the intentionality that you bring is consistent, no matter who it's with, right? That you're never above reproach, and that you have a sense of humility to always say, I don't have all the answers, and that's okay, but how can I help? How can you help me get there, right? So that'd be my 2 cents.
I forgot to add one quick thing. How I got my job at TWU, when I was a coordinator for orientation at UNT, and 2 of my students then went to grad school, and they were both coordinators in the office at TWU. And there was this job open. They were like, hey, Josh, have you thought about this? And I'm like, sure, let's try it. But it's kind of wild. Like, I work in an office with two coordinators, that one's a coordinator of civic engagement and the other one's now assistant director of student orgs in Greek life, that I work in the office, and they were my OLs like 6-7 years ago. And so that, even then, I never thought a former student would be referencing and sending me a job, which is pretty cool, but it shows too how small the world is.
I love that a sentiment, Josh. Yeah, it really is all about who you know. And I also just love that we had a live example of networking here in this meeting today, between Mr. Torres and Dr. Shirley. That was very exciting and unexpected. I did not know that you two were connected in that way, so that's really cool. But yeah, it's really a lot about, gathering mentors and, even meeting with colleagues, professionals you meet at conferences, even family members can be part of your networking network. So thank you all for helping to highlight sort of that sentiment and that idea. We'll go to the next question now. So this is, what are a couple of key skills, whether they are soft or hard skills, that you found to be vital in your own work, and how are you able to build upon those skills in your early career?
So Damien really just mentioned one that I think of all the time. Humility is very, very crucial to have. Like, you don't know it all, and you never will know it all. And so I've built on that early in my career, because I was once upon a time one of those young GAs who thought couldn't nobody tell him anything. And I bumped my head more than a few times. And so realizing the fact that, and humility goes a long way, right? Because it allows people to see that you're human. And one of the things that I think that's one of the things that is very important for our students is that I appreciate them seeing me as a superhero, but I need them to see me as somebody who is attainable. I need them to see me as somebody who is relatable. I need them to see me as somebody who's human, because the minute that I disappoint them, if they had this superhero ideology of me, it's going to crush them and disappoint them. And also, that gives them the permission to make mistakes and be human as well. And so humility is definitely one of those soft skills that I learned early on. A hard skill that I learned early on was, again, working in the functional area that I work in. You have to be ready to do some crisis and some risk management on a pivot. Like, you've got to be able, at any given time, again, something can go wrong in fraternity and sorority life. I mean, when we had the big snow apocalypse a few weeks ago, I had 4 sorority houses with thousands of dollars worth of damage. But it was not only that, it was, now these women are displaced and I need to help find them somewhere else to stay for the remainder of the semester. I need to get them meal plans, because they were used to cooking in their sorority house, and now they don't have a kitchen because the sorority house is flooded. Like, all of these things, conversations with parents, conversations with national headquarters, conversations with the students themselves, sometimes competing information. Like, this student in this house heard one thing, but this student over here, she heard something else. And now she's in a group meet with her friend who's in another chapter telling, and the information is just wrong. It's wrong. And so having to sit back and be ready to make those pivots and understand, take that deep breath and be like, all right, today's going to be a long day and it may be a long night, but I got this. And if I don't, I have the humility to ask for help or say, I don't have all the answers.
I think probably, and this is very similar to what Dr. Shirley said, it's just being willing to listen to other people at your institution. That was one of the first things that I did when I started at TWU. I met with, I think I had 54 meetings with different staff and faculty around campus just to get a feel for what the campus culture was, who are our students and what have they seen be successful. And in listening to them and taking their feedback and then using that to shape what I do, everybody on campus was very happy because they feel a part of it. And also they were the experts, not me. I've never been a student at TW. I didn't work here before. Yes, I have an idea of what orientation should be, but like, how does that fit their mold here at TW? How do I make that the most successful program that it can be? But beyond listening to that, I think in the field, we need to listen to our students. At this point, I'm not that old, but I'm 32 years old. And so what I think our students may want may be the exact opposite. Also, I'm a white male at an institution that is minority serving, Hispanic serving, and mostly women. So I don't have those experiences that all of my students are having. And so it's important for me to understand and listen to them, listen what's important to them, and learning how to support them and what they do. Because I think that's the only way that people are going to enjoy and feel a part of the community, is to feel heard. And I think that is one of the biggest things, is hearing our students and hearing those other people around and making sure that we can provide that support they need to be successful.
I'd
I
also
love
like,
the humility. Oh,
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. Trujillo.
Thank you. I love the humility. I love that because Dr. Shirley said it much nicer than my old professor did. What he said is, when I graduated as a brand new teacher, he said, keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. And that was just, you don't know everything. You're brand new. You're a novice. Listen to the teachers that have been there for a while, that know what's going on, that know what they're doing, and learn from them. The other great advice came from a mentor, in fact, from UNT. Dr. Richard Fossey and Dr. Doug Schaus, both of them were my mentors and are my mentors in higher ed. Both of them said, go out there and get visible. Go and get involved. Whatever job you get at whatever institution or establishment you end up at, go out there and do as much as you can. Get on committees so you can learn how the university works or the organization works. Get on committees also so that you can meet more people within that organization. Just go out there and learn as much as you can, because the more you learn and know about your organization, the better you can do your job.
And I'd like to add one more thing: being friendly and approachable. In my line of work, I'm dean of students, and I deal a lot with conduct, and people shy away from anyone as mean as me. So I try to be friendly and approachable, because I want the students to ask me questions. I want the students to know that they're accepted, even though it's learning experiences for them. So I would just add friendliness and being approachable to the list.
Yeah, and I'd say that education as a whole is very altruistic in nature, right? That there's a level of selflessness that comes. And so for me, what I would encourage as soft skills, or just something to keep in mind, is that anytime you find yourself wanting to either, be the spotlight or whatever, and I share students with that right now. In the past 2 years, if you Google UNT and DEI, you're going to see a lot of interesting things. When students begin to center themselves, we challenge them to say, hey, what movement is happening? Is it about you or what the larger movement? So always reminding yourself like your passion and why you're there, but your ability to be coached, which is what most people are talking about, right? And listen and learn and take criticism and give feedback, I think is key. And then to have a sense of urgency, right? For me, and in the work that we do working with our marginalized identities, I love having conversations and planning, but at the end of the day, every conversation, every planning session means that another student, perhaps in my case, might be being passively excluded, right? might in fact be discriminated against, excluded explicitly in a lot of ways. And so there's this idea that, hey, let's do this, but then how are we transitioning that, right? From declaring that we are something to demonstrating that, right? So we move away from beginning to say, yeah, we're diverse, we're inclusive, we declare that all day, to this is how we demonstrate it to you on a daily basis. And so that sense of urgency for me is something I would encourage every one of you to keep in mind. And depending on what functional area you end in, it might look different, but always to say, okay, well, how are we moving this forward? What else can we do to be more intentional?
Y'all get all these nuggets. Collect the nuggets, students. Collect them. And my nuggets aren't even that big, but I love everything about this whole conversation. I just had to say that.
Yeah, I totally agree with Dr. Shirley. You all had absolutely wonderful examples. And I took some notes just to summarize, because I feel like everything that every one of you mentioned was a really important skill that you should carry with you in this field. So we mentioned humility, crisis and risk management. Absolutely, listening was top of the list too. Knowledge of cultural context, getting involved, being active and networking, being approachable and friendly, altruism, and absolutely inclusivity as well. Those are the major ones I heard everyone kind of putting on our bullet list, and I think that they're really good. So I wanted to reiterate them to everyone. And I might even post them into the chat as well. But thank you all for those wonderful answers. I know that we're getting low on time, but I did want to make sure that we got to the question about COVID, because we did have a specific person ask that as well. So I am going to skip one of our optional questions and go to that one. So if you could all answer, how has your work been impacted by COVID? And are there any changes that you think will last beyond the current situation?
I'll just share briefly that I think that COVID and the pandemic, from a health perspective, has amplified the already marginalized, inequitable outcomes that we knew existed, right? In fact, that we as an educational administrators, being in an educational space, and we as a society anticipated would never have to look the way it has in the past year. Because of that, our work and from a DEI perspective has increased, right? What we hope is a consistent trend around inclusion and why it matters. And so for me, it's altered it in the sense that we had to pivot pretty hard and say, virtually, how can we still have the same impact on our student community and the DEN community at large when it comes to DEI? And so that means that my role, while I was maintaining relationships in person with students and administrators and sharing this, shifted virtually. It meant that some of our largest impact programs were delivered virtually. It means that we got to kick off with Dr. Shirley new opportunities, because instances around DEI did not stop, right, when it came to Greek life or when it came to just our student community. So for me, it just meant that how can we still accomplish the goal while recognizing that students are literally living through a once in a lifetime, perhaps, type of event, right? And not just saying, hey, well, we need your same commitment and energy level. Absolutely not. Hey, but how can we continue to meet your needs in a virtual setting?
For the Dean of Students Office and those studying in higher education, student engagement is the key. If the students are not engaged, they're less likely to complete their meet their educational goal. And so for us, we, as Damien said, we really had to pivot and try new things. And that's the risk that you take in higher education. No one had a playbook to tell us just how to manage COVID and how to do student activities and how to engage with our students. We had to learn very fast what worked and what didn't. But I think my message to you is, don't be afraid to take a risk, because that's how you're going to learn. And if it doesn't work, well, try something else. But that's how that changed our role at NCTC, is being able to try new things and to be able to risk it not working and us being okay with that.
To really emphasize Dr. Del Rio's point, I mean, we were told essentially at UNT, and Damien could probably attest to this, figure it out and make it work. And if it doesn't work, we won't do it again. But let's try it. COVID has definitely impacted fraternity and sorority life. We're social organizations by our nature. Like it's nothing for us to have 20 people in a house having a sleepover in a living room. Like our interactions are very, very social in nature. And to have that taken away from our students just like that, it's painful for them, and it's still painful for them. And so we had to really figure out, how are we going to do recruitment? How are we going to create these opportunities for fraternity and sorority life to continue to be a viable engagement opportunity? Because, you know, in a normal year, we are more engaged than your regular non-involved student, or our retention and graduation rates are higher because of those social interactions. But if you take that component away, how do you still tell the story of fraternity and sorority life? So we had to really pivot and talk about the values of our organizations first and foremost, the networking within our organizations as well, and collaborating with departments such as Damien and his team over in MC, or our colleagues in housing and our colleagues in the union, to figure out how we're able to still create these opportunities for our students. But yeah, this was the year for us. We were like, all right, well, we've never had a virtual XYZ, so let's have it. And it ended up being far more successful than an event that we would have in person, because more people were able to attend. Students didn't have to miss work. We were able to record it for those students who weren't able to attend. So, I mean, there are some diamonds in the rough on this. But again, the thing about student affairs, and I was going to say this earlier about the skills that we need to have, we got to be lifelong learners, y'all. We cannot sit up here and say, well, I've been doing this for 15 years and I don't want to learn how to work Zoom, so I'm just not going to do it. No, that's not good enough, because then you're going to lose your job. So we have to be able to either learn the skill ourselves or hire talented staff who can learn the skill, and we get out of their way. One of my coordinators, she is a whiz at Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And I said, tell me who gets in your way so I can get them out your way. And that's literally what it is, but we have to be comfortable with that, and also be comfortable with ambiguity at times.
And you go ahead.
Sorry, Josh, I hit the mute button. I wasn't even ready to talk. I apologize.
No worries. And so something Dr. Shirley mentioned is people like, oh, we've been doing it. There's a lot that I think is going to stick moving forward. And I think beyond what the actual pandemic was, I do think there's some progressive good change that we've learned and had to learn because of the situation, that I think will continue forward. And I think it'll hopefully keep people's mindsets of moving forward. Damien mentioned that earlier, is like constantly moving forward and thinking ahead. And I think that's extremely important. And I think this is going to force people to do more of that.
From the teaching learning perspective, I think what's going to stay is more online learning and more applications and technology being used in online learning and supporting that instructional delivery. We've seen already students have asked for both summer and fall that they want more online courses, that they do not want to come to campus. So we're fulfilling the requests as best as we can.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for sharing, your perspectives on how COVID impacted your work. We really appreciate all of your advice. I'm very much aware of the time. We're about 3 minutes over when we were originally supposed to end. And so I'd like to be respectful of your time boundaries and go ahead and get us wrapped up today. And so I apologize to any of the students who may have had some extra questions. We normally do try to include some time for questions, but I thought it might be helpful if any of our panelists are comfortable with it to share maybe their LinkedIn or their emails to see if any students might have questions they want to ask directly, because we normally do try and save time for that. But just wanting to respect everyone's time. And I also just want to thank everyone again, just so much for being here today, answering our questions, sharing your knowledge and your experiences. We are incredibly grateful that you're here to talk to our students and and just to share what you've gone through and how you've gotten where you are today. So thank you all again for everything that you have said today. And with that, I'll give you all a moment to maybe say goodbye or to wrap up, or whatever final thoughts you'd like to share with everyone.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was an awesome opportunity to talk about ourselves.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. All right. Y'all have a great, wonderful weekend, or well, almost weekend. It's Thursday. Getting ahead of myself. All right. Bye, everyone.